I'm going to go ahead and call to order this meeting. Monroe County Plan Commission is January 21st. Can we have a roll call, please?
Margaret Clemens.
Here.
Ron Randolph.
Here.
Rudy Garitas.
Here.
Jeff McKim.
Here.
Jerry Pittsford.
Here.
Jim Steenberg is not present. Julie Thomas.
Here.
Amy Thompson said she would not be here. David Warren.
Here.
Okay, we have 7 members in a quorum.
All right, thank you. If you could please introduce the evidence.
Request that the following items be introduced as evidence for tonight's meeting. Monroe County Comprehensive Plan is adopted and amended. Monroe County Zoning Ordinance is adopted and amended. Monroe County Subdivision Ordinance is adopted and amended. The rules of procedure of the Monroe County Plan Commission, and the case is advertised and docketed for hearing on tonight's agenda.
We have a motion.
Move we approve the evidence.
Here, a second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and I'll just note that Mr. Wilson did that without once looking at a piece of paper. All in favor of approving the evidence as introduced, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, can we have a motion on the agenda?
Move we approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any changes, corrections, updates? All those in favor of the, I'm sorry?
Just a note that the fields rezone was continued.
Was continued.
So just in case there are folks here for the fields rezone, that one is continued until next month.
All right, great, thank you. All those in favor of approving the agenda as published signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we have approval of minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on minutes. I didn't see them, though.
We didn't send those out yet, sorry.
Okay.
Barb is very good, so usually.
I thought
those
I'd missed them, and I was
Yeah.
like, well, this is gonna be one where I'm gonna have to abstain because I didn't
No.
read them. Okay.
She did finish them today, so I'll
Okay.
just send them out and maybe get them approved during the admin meeting. but-
All right.
Must have been adjourned.
Yeah, 'cause it's
And
listed
just in
on
case
your,
anybody
your
is
slide.
It's still listed there, too.
Item 3 on the agenda, which is the Fields Historic Preservation Overlay Rezone in Sanders, has been continued. It will likely be heard at the next meeting.
Okay. Now on to administrative business. We could start with the appointments for this board. For president, vice president. Any motions?
I move Margaret Clemens as president.
I'll second that. Any other nominations? Willing to serve?
Yes.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving Margaret Clemens as president of this board signify by saying aye. Aye.
I'd like to move that we nominate Julie Thomas as vice president of this commission.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other nominations? All those in favor of approving me as vice president of the committee signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have other appointments here. We could start with the executive committee, which also has 2 additional plan commission members on it. I do recommend that Mr. McKim serve on this committee if he's willing, because as a county councilor, that's our conduit for budget issues. So if anyone else wants to make a motion for another member.
I'd like to make a motion. Over the last couple of years, I've made the slate nomination, and I would like to kind of continue that. Basically, I'd like to put the 3 elected officials on that committee and the president, which allows the public to hold this commission more accountable. That was the reason I made my first slate nomination. I think it's been successful ever since, and I had the pleasure to serve on there for the last 2 consecutive years. So my motion would be to have Council Member Jeff McKim, Margaret Clemens, Commissioner Julie Thomas, and myself as the executive committee.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other nominations for one or two of the spots? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Should probably do the nays as well, just in case.
Any, I heard all of them, but
I
any opposed? Okay, that would have been my nay. But I'm going to hand the meeting over to Ms. Clements to take it from here.
Okay, well, we move on to the unfinished business,
No,
and...
we still have more appointments.
We have more appointments tonight.
So we still
Okay,
have BZA.
okay,
We do have other committees.
Yeah.
What's the next one we have up there?
could you handle the
Yeah, okay,
appointments?
sure.
Because I-
BZA appointment
Right.
from the Plan
So
Commission.
we have a,
Still Bernie. Bernie's the current.
right. Are you willing to continue?
For Black Committee?
For BZA?
Yeah, I'll stick with that.
Any other, I'm going to nominate Bernie, but are there any other nominations? Thanks, Bernie. All in favor of Mr. Garatas as our BZA appointment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Say it. Plan Review Committee, typically, let's see, who's currently on that committee? The problem is we've got a couple people missing today, so that's part of the problem that we have. Do committees here work like they do in elsewhere in county government, where if there's no appointment, everybody continues until there is an appointment?
I think that's probably true.
Okay.
Until you're reappointed. The only complication we have is we have a number of vacancies
Right,
on
Right.
some of these committees.
but I didn't see any applicants.
Not as far as commission members, other than the Ordinance Review Committee. I think Susie Johnson is still listed on that.
All right. What's the pleasure of the Plan Commission at this point? If we have vacancies, that's important, we can talk about Plan Commission members who serve, but if we don't have any applicants, then it's really difficult to talk about resident members, so.
I was curious about the MPO and if Margaret still wanted to serve on that. The MPO.
The MPO.
And if not, I'd be amenable to take that on.
Yeah.
I could take that off my plate. Or do you?
I serve as an alternate. I think
Yeah,
there's a lot
alternate
of.
would be good, I think,
Okay.
but, I'm still working through all of these here.
I'm interested in the plat committee,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any thoughts, on, our other committees in terms of appointments, plan review, plat, and ordinance review at this moment?
I would remain on the Black Committee.
Okay,
I mean, if we're just looking to
Okay.
find volunteers to fill slots, I'll stay
Okay.
on the Black Committee. I
Okay.
don't have a problem with
Good.
that.
And so will I. And I.
okay.
I
And
think
you're on it now,
Amy's-
right? Both of
yeah.
you are on it now.
I think Amy, I think one of the reasons is Platt's one of the committees that she can really serve on
Okay,
a limited
Okay.
amount of disruption with
so
her
that's
schedule.
3. Do you want to stay on MPO then?
I wouldn't mind the plat committee just because.
Yeah, so we've already got
there's a
3
lot of
members.
action
Yeah, we've
on
already got
that.
3 members.
Yeah.
Up there for you.
So, do we have to
Even more
just,
MPO.
am I having any effect?
Mhm. Yeah.
Can we continue this to another meeting?
We can.
I
We
move
can.
that we continue the rest of the appointments till the next meeting.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, which means everything stays as it is for MPO plat, plan review, and ordinance review. Of course, those who have left the plan commission obviously will no longer be serving, but we can address this at the administrative meeting in February,
That's fine.
That's good.
right? Okay.
Okay.
So just a reminder for anybody out in TV land that we are looking for applicants for these committees. Most meet just once a month. If you're interested in learning more about planning and zoning, please consider applying. You can find an application on the county's website, co.monroe.in.us, and if you get it sent into the commissioners, we'll get it out to the plan commission, so.
And if anybody has questions in regard to becoming a citizen member of any of these committees, feel free to call the planning office and we can kind of go through the meeting dates and what the duties are and what's involved. But we'd be glad to do that with anyone who's interested in an appointment on a citizen committee.
Right.
Madam Chair, may I just make a quick?
Please.
Just want to say that I know this is not a plan commission appointment, but the county council did appoint our member to the BZA, and that's William Jose. And so you've probably already received that information, right? Or have you not? Okay. Our council office will send it out, but we did it at the last meeting.
Good. All right, great.
So the balance of these committees, you want to just wait till the administrative meeting?
Yeah, but we do encourage residents to apply, and it lightens the load for the Plan Commission, but it also gives you great insight into how planning works in Monroe County, so, yeah, good. So I'll hand it back.
Okay, so we're moving on to the unfinished business, and the first case that we're going to hear tonight is 1906-SPP-01, Southern Meadows Major Subdivision Preliminary Plat, with a plat vacation requested and a buildable area waiver requested, and this is the final hearing. Ms. Nestor?
Okay, thank you. So, as Margaret stated, this is the final hearing. There was a preliminary hearing on this, but seeing that there's a couple new faces in the crowd, I'll give just a broad overview and then go into questions that the Plan Commission might have. One thing I wanted to bring up just at the beginning was that last month this was for 96 parcels, and this time it's for 98 parcels. The reason for this is that they've added 2 common areas. One was the fee simple of the abandoned railroad corridor, so that's something that staff had requested. And then because the result of that being in a common area, it kind of split up another common area, so they created 2 common areas to basically meet one of the conditions that the trail be put in a fee simple lot. So this project is located in Perry Township. It has frontage on Rogers Street and College Drive. The current zoning of this parcel is medium density residential, and the slope here is relatively flat. It's about 14.8% slope, sloping from the east side over to the west side, where there is floodplain on the northwest corner of the site. The proposed zoning in the comprehensive plan has this as neighborhood development, so we do see this area as a good location for single-family residential, which is what is being proposed tonight. The plat itself, including 98 lots, has several common areas, as I mentioned, so 8 common areas now. One agreement that's going to happen with this subdivision is that they're proposing to connect through to that road. This would be done through an off-site property through a recorded easement. So in return for allowing this easement to go through the Blind Squirrels parcel, which is up on the map here with the blue arrow, they're going to be giving Blind Squirrels 2 common areas in return. One is with a star on it, and then the other one is directly north, where there's currently a Smithville easement. In order to do anything with these 2 common area lots, there would have to be a development plan proposed and some other petitions through the planning department that would come back through Plan Commission and receive notice to neighbors, so just so everyone is aware. The parcel itself, once the roads are put in, they will not be able to meet the requirement for what's called buildable area. So because of the requirements for the road construction at intersections and slope requirements and thresholds, they're basically going to have to apply for what's called a buildable area waiver for approximately 44% of the site. Actually, I'll show on a later slide, this buildable area waiver will allow for the petitioner and the engineer to actually provide less grading work than if the buildable area waiver is not granted. And that's because the existing grades and the road will be at such intervals that they're basically going to be putting walkout basements along these lots. And so they won't have to do as much ground disturbance as if they were to flat grade them with a building pad. The petitioner has provided some tree preservation areas as requested. So this site does have tree buffers that are able to buffer the South Crest Mobile Home Park, the Patton Heights development. There's also a nice buffer between the creek and this property, and then also the school Clear Creek to the south. So in the green on the screen, you'll see that these are the areas where they're proposing tree preservation areas that would be recorded on the plat, and that would be enforceable through any kind of building plans that we would see. We'd make sure that these were actually followed. I have the plat on the screen up here. Some folks may have gone to an earlier neighborhood meeting. The parcel with a star on it is another development proposed that's in our office currently, and that's under the Shermer neighborhood subdivision. That has been continued, and so that will be heard later on this year. But at this point, the development in question is the parcel up on the screen. I also have a blue triangle over the piece of the Blind Squirrels property where the easement to that road will be connected. There are several sinkholes on this site, and I wanted to correct myself from a previous meeting. There are 11 sinkholes on the property in total. So I just wanted to make that clear. I did put a better resolution of the plans in there, so hopefully everyone was able to access those. I have kind of a going through some of the subdivisions before and after over an aerial that I can go through with folks, and I just want to show the Plan Commission and members of the audience where these streets and configurations of lots will be located. So starting on the east side, there's an entrance off of College Drive to Rockaway Court. This location would include some tree preservation areas. So this is what the site looks like currently, and this is what it would look like under the proposed plan. So the dark areas would be tree preservation areas. Here's kind of the northern site, so the FEMA floodplain would all be captured into a common area or common areas. And then you have a little bit of tree preservation between the South Crest Mobile Home Park. I will note that they're no longer able to do a side path that goes all the way into the South Crest Mobile Home Park. They did not receive consent to do so. So they're going to be doing a side path that just reaches to the edge of the northern property line for future connectivity to the school to the south, since there'll be sidewalks all the way down. And that's what this area looks like currently. And then you have over towards that road connection, there's currently a building in the way, so if this were to be approved, they would move that building out of the way and create connectivity to that road. As you'll notice, that's in the floodway, so they'll be required to get additional permits through the Department of Natural Resources in order to obtain permits for construction. So that would be something that we would make sure happens right after, if this subdivision were to be approved. That would be the number one thing to go ahead and get going before they could plat any of these lots, because this would be part of phase one. Here's what this area looks like without the plat. And then kind of the southern portion of the site near the school, you have several sinkholes that in the previous meetings there were some concern about development of these lots in relation to the sinkholes. And so there are 4 lots that share 6 sinkholes, essentially. And the petitioner has submitted some exhibits to show what it might look like to have development on these without disturbing the sinkholes. And I think I have that on a later slide, but I will show that as well. And that's what this area looks like, so you can kind of see where the sinkholes are, those darker green circles on the screen. There's also the area that's going to be next to the Patton Heights subdivision. This area does include a tree preservation buffer of those pine trees that are nicely spaced there to give residents some privacy. So that's what that area looks like currently. And again, that area would be mostly preserved there. I had looked into the USGS map to see if there were any additional sinkholes that may have come up that the surveyor or the petitioner engineer wasn't able to locate. Those sinkholes, after Kendall, the engineer on this project, geolocated those, one showed to be off-site, and the other one seemed to correlate well with this sinkhole that's already located near Rockaway Court. So that was the only other source of information I had for sinkholes on this site from the 1995 plan. So I wanted to go through quickly just a schematic of the phasing that they're proposing. So one of the things that the Plan Commission is reviewing tonight is if this subdivision is approved, how will construction take place and what's the timeline for construction? So they're doing it in 6 phases, and so if approved, the first phase that would be under construction is highlighted in yellow. And this area would include that road connection, and then they'd be pulling utilities from the west, so that's why they have to start at this location. So this would be the first location that they would start construction. The second phase would be to the north, so as they pull utilities, they'll be going towards the north. And then you have phase 3 as it continues, so that's the first phase where there'll be that row of Patton Heights neighbors that will be impacted. And phase 2 will be the first phase where the South Crest Mobile Home Park may be impacted by the noise of construction because it'll be directly adjoining. Phase 4 is off of Rockaway Court, so that's when they would be connecting into College Drive at that point. And the previous 3 phases would be occupied at this point. So at this point, when they go ahead and connect the road to College Drive, these neighbors would start to see potentially residents in those homes accessing off of College Drive, but primarily probably going through that road. The 5th phase is on the south side of the development, southwest side, and then the final 6th phase is on the southeast side, and that includes the off-site improvement to create a side path to the school. And here's just an overview of the phasing map. Got some site photos here. So on the left, Rogers Street, view of that, and then of course the creek is located there. And then the bottom photo, I'm standing at the Smithville easement. So this is where they have frontage, but it's not realistic to connect there. On this photo is showing where that road would connect and the building there would be relocated or removed in order to allow for that connection to happen. Some site photos here, like I mentioned, a lot of these trees will be able to be preserved under this current plan. And then taking some site photos off of College Drive, they have existing sidewalk. The neighborhood is well developed out there, so there would be connection to that sidewalk as well as repair of any sidewalk that gets that basically gets disturbed during this process of construction. College Drive currently dead ends, as you know, so there's only one outlet over to South Old State Road 37. So with this proposal, there will be some off-site improvements that I will be getting to, but it'll be a turning lane off of Old State Road 37 and a turn lane off of Rogers Street that the petitioner is amenable to doing as part of this. Here are some schematics showing, I believe it was lots 88 to 92. Let me just check those. 88 to 91 on this side, showing where the driveway would be located as well as the home site to be located. That wouldn't disturb the sinkholes on the site as proposed. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. There was also a question posed at the last meeting about possibly a shared driveway for some of these lots. 88 and 90 have driveways in close proximity to one another, so that could be a question for the engineer if there was still questions about these lots and the amount of developable area there is. And then between lots 43 and 44, there's a shared sinkhole as well, so I wanted to show the schematic for what that might look like. So this image is showing one of the earlier iterations of the plan. Staff has gone through about 13 iterations of this plan to get it to where the grading and the drainage all come together really well. So on the left-hand side is showing a grading plan if the buildable area waiver is denied. So you're looking at much more disturbance of these areas. And then on the right-hand side was something where we came up with, apply for the buildable area waiver, leave those slopes alone and meet grade earlier, and this could be amenable for a walkout basement type development. So it's something that we don't have a good provision for in our current ordinance, but something that we're hoping to look forward to improving in the next phase of our ordinance later on this year. So there were some highway recommendations of those off-site improvements. They have met all of the requirements for ADA compliance as well as road grades. And I'll go ahead and show those off-site improvements. So on the left-hand side is just showing where they're going to be connecting to Rockaway Court off of College Drive. And then on the right-hand side is showing where there would be a road improvement on South Roger Street for that turning blister. And then they're also showing a turning blister off of South Old State Road 37. So the Highway Department at this point is satisfied with what has been submitted thus far. Terry is also here. He's reviewed the latest drainage calculations and has some comments that are going to be addressed in the final version if approved. And this is just a MS4 drainage recommendation, so drainage calculations supporting the project, they were reviewed this week, and Terry could bring up any questions that folks might have on this. So staff has recommended approval of the subdivision with 10 conditions, but before I get into those, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to walk through those and answer any of your questions beforehand.
Okay, do any of the commission members to my left have any questions for staff? Mr.
One question, this would be kind of maybe more for the public to kind of, if they're trying to follow along. If you go back kind of to where you were showing some of the sinkholes and discuss the fact that the sinkhole is the inner circle and the outer circle is where we have the conservancy area.
Yes.
Just for the public so they know that's not how large the actual sinkhole is.
Sure, yes, so good point. These circles on the screen, there's a sinkhole eye, which is the outermost rim of a sinkhole that has a elevation that's depressed from the outer area, and then we require a 25-foot buffer around each of those sinkhole closed contour areas. So what you're looking at is actually a distance at least 25 feet away from an actual sinkhole, or those outer circles that you're looking at.
Any other questions to my left? And to my right, Mr. McKim?
Yeah, just on the phasing, so just to clarify, the path to the school will not be available to the very final phase of the development, is that right?
Yeah, at this point, that's what's being proposed, is that sixth phase would be the school and that off-site improvement.
I mean, that's kind of unfortunate. I don't know what it actually looks like there, whether the kids will be able to just create a goat path to get to school or, you hate to set up a situation where they need to be bused just a few blocks away, which occurs all over the county because of
Right.
lack of safe access.
Right. So unfortunately, in order to get that side path in, they would have to do, likely have to do the roads at that point.
Right, I
And
get
then-
that.
Yeah, so I don't know if, I'll wait for this to.
We'll just pause for a minute while the bells ring. Okay.
So they had that originally as an earlier phase, but I think that one of the plan commission members was worried about a second form of ingress egress. And because of the continuity of pulling in utilities from the west to the east, they had to either go northeast or southeast. So we chose Rockaway Court to have that second form of ingress egress before we got to any of the further phases, so that as this development gets more than halfway finished, people would have a vehicular way of accessing out. Yeah, I agree. I wish it was sooner.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would prevent them from having a bus route regardless. I mean, they might not have that many ridership, but I still think that they're going to have to provide service if they would now versus not having that connection. So I'm not certain if they have to.
Well, it depends on the walking distance.
Is it so like they wouldn't necessarily have a stop there regardless?
Right.
I'm not that familiar with the bus routes, but I would think you would still have to provide service even if we had the connection possibly. I'm not certain though. And that it was my comment to adjust the phasing because I did think the connectivity was more important.
Yeah, I
through the
don't
phasing.
disagree. I know there's only so many configurations you can have, and I think the two points of egress is critical. So I'm just kind of raising a concern.
No, I think it would be great if we could add that connection in there if it was feasible. I'm curious what the developers or petitioners would say on that.
I know there's, may I?
Yes, Mr.
Sorry.
Pittsburgh.
I know there's always concerns about safety and kids walking through areas that are not sidewalks or walking paths, but I think sometimes the delay allows you to determine the appropriate place for the side path or for the sidewalk because they'll show you where they're going to walk.
Yeah, that's right. I meant by the
You
goat
can-
path. Yeah,
Right,
that's
exactly.
exactly.
You know, I read an article one time about an architect who designed a college campus with no sidewalks, and the trustee said, "Where are the sidewalks?" He said, "I'll tell you in 2 years." You know, you see where the walking pattern goes, and that's where you put your sidewalks.
Yes, Mr. Warren.
Question related to path to the school. So I know at the last meeting, the petitioner noted that the owner of the mobile home community was not in favor of them building the sidewalk connection. Will the petitioner still be at least making that sidewalk up to the property line so that if a new owner wishes to extend it, they can?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's just, I think I might have a photo of it. It's just basically a thin vegetated area that if someone wanted to go through it, wouldn't be very
Okay.
difficult to.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, Ms. Chellan, do you want to go over the requirements or the stipulations, or should we turn it over to the community at this point?
Sure, let me go ahead and I'll try and sum those up as best I can or as quickly as I can. So we're recommending approval with 10 conditions, so I'll read through those to see if that answers anyone's questions or if that stems more questions. So the first condition is that all residential lots in the subdivision are required to submit engineered site plans before issuance of improvement location permits and building permits. Before certificate of occupancy, each lot must submit engineered as-built plans of the developed lot for approval by the MS4 operator. Number 3, petitioner must indicate lowest adjacent grade for the following lots, and these are because they're near a stormwater outfall or the FEMA floodplain, or Terry has flagged them otherwise. So that's lots 10, 22, 43, 44, 55 through 64, 71, 72, 84 through 86, 88, 89, 90, 91, 93 through 96, and that'll be shown on the preliminary and the final plats. And changes made to the lowest adjacent grade can be approved administratively through the Monroe County Drainage Board. Number 4, borrow sites throughout the subdivision can be permitted no matter the phasing, and that's so that we don't have a situation where they're bringing in a lot of fill that otherwise is going to be needed to take out on the site and you remain neutral. Number 5, abandoned railroad bed to be used as a trail should be placed in a fee simple lot and built out as part of the subdivision, which they have complied with. Number 6, the commitment between Blind Squirrels and AEI, Abington Abington Emerson investments must be recorded following preliminary plat approval and prior to final plat recording. Number 7, the petitioner submit written commitments for off-site work to be conducted with approval of this project. Number 8, developer commits to grant sinkhole conservancy area per Chapter 829 should new sinkholes surface prior to the lot development. A geotechnical engineer must be present on the site during initial mass grading of any phase, especially during road and detention pond construction. If an issue arises, the petitioner's engineer will be required to notify staff and provide any alternate plans. Number 9, drainage details of floodway crossing at west entrance are to be approved prior to preliminary plat approval. And number 10, the remaining drainage calculations are to be approved prior to preliminary plat approval. And Terry has reviewed those, and Kendall has complied or said that he would comply with all of those requirements.
Thank you. Would the petitioner or the petitioner's representative like to address the commission?
And just a note, Dave, the left-hand photo is from South Crest Mobile Home Park, and that's how they would have to get through that tree area to get to the sidewalk. Yeah.
And would you please state your name and your affiliation? Thank you.
Kendall Kanoki, Smith Brehab and Associates. I also wanted to point out that the owner team is here as well. And we just wanted to say thanks to Jackie for a great presentation, and we are here to answer questions.
Okay, do any members of the commission have any questions for Mr. Kendall, my members to the left?
Quick question. Is number 10, do we need to reword that? Is condition number 10 going to be consistent with an approval tonight? I mean, should we reword that to?
That's a good question. Since all the drainage calculations haven't been fully met, right, Terry? They need to be, I might have Terry answer that one, but yes, the short answer could be that remaining drainage calculations approved prior to moving on to final plat recording. It's kind of a, between preliminary plat approval and actually recording the final plat, there's a lot that goes on. So I think that's why we put preliminary plat approval. But Kendall, have you submitted all of the changes that have been requested to this point?
Yes, just about. There's a few very minor detailed stuff that still has to be reviewed by Terry, but he's given me his comments. I've addressed the comments, then we just have to go back and forth maybe one more time on that.
The reason why I'm at, I just don't want to get caught up in semantics here later, because we prove it tonight, and
Yes.
you see what I'm asking
Yes.
that question? I think we need to maybe modify that.
Should it be recording recording rather than approval, or what would be the right way to phrase that? I get what you're saying.
Approved prior to any permit issuance?
Yeah, I would say prior to any grading permit being issued. Is that, do you understand what I'm,
Yeah.
Could you put number 10 up on the screen so we
Sure.
could read that again?
my only point is that could be a endless do loop, if anybody remembers what Fortran is.
Yes, my concern is the sensitivity, the environmental sensitivity of the area, and the condition that the engineer has to be on, independent engineer has to be on site in order to review when they move land.
May I offer just and we're not to that phase, but I think
Yes.
we need to get it out just to discuss it, but maybe prior to issuance of any grading permit?
Prior to any permits, issuance of any permits.
Okay.
Or grading permits, if you'd like. Okay. So
Approved by?
the permit's approved by, is that what
No,
you're saying?
the remaining drainage calculations approved by.
Terry?
By the MS4 coordinator?
Yeah,
Yeah.
MS4.
Thank you.
I'll read that out loud. So remaining drainage calculations are to be approved by the MS4 coordinator prior to issuance of any permits.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Kendall? Yes, Julie, Ms. Thomas?
I still have a lot of concerns about the karst features on the property because we're really changing a lot of the way that water moves on that property. I mean, in a big, substantial way by putting in roads and houses with roofs and walkout basements and whatnot. Has there been any consideration for delaying some portions of this until we can get a sense after a year or so of how this property is going to handle all of this new water pathway that's going to be created?
Well, we are doing the 6 phases, and I think we have 4 years, well, 2 years, and then we can ask for a 2-year extension. I think it's safe to assume we'll take up most of that time, correct? So you're looking at the entire thing being built out in about 4 years.
The problem is if we give approval, and that makes sense, and I appreciate that most of this is in phase 4 and 5 and 6, sorry. But the problem is that if we go ahead and give approval, then we can't say, no, you can't build there now after the fact. I'm so concerned about what these property owners, these future property owners are going to be stuck with, and we won't be able to help them. And I just feel like there are too many unknowns with this, especially given the changes to, if this was already built out, I would have many fewer concerns. It's just not been built out. And you can see the way that these karst features are aligned are leading me to question what's underneath there and what's going to happen when we shift the way water flows on this property. So I have a lot of concerns.
I think I wanted to point out that each parcel has to be reviewed by the MS4 coordinator. So potentially in phases 5 and 6, those kinds of issues could be addressed. Terry, is that correct?
Terry, if you would, please, because I have a question for you anyway.
We're going to be implementing something that we don't usually implement for typical residential building permits with this petition condition. We're asking that they have engineered site plans and engineered as-bills so that we could review both and make sure they match. If they do not match, we could find out a way to get that, to alleviate that or some issue, but I'll let Terry speak further to that.
Mr. Quillman?
No, what was the question again? So make sure I get started off right.
No, I didn't have a question for him.
I think let me see if I can make a stab at it. And there was a question about the impact on the sinkholes as development progressed. And there was something more specific to it.
While you were reviewing those plot plans, would you be able to restrict development if issues have arisen because of the development?
Thank you. I think there was a condition earlier we discussed at the first hearing maybe where if additional sinkholes or something more showed up, that the developer had agreed just to eliminate that lot or that condition. I haven't heard anything about it tonight, but that's what I remember from the first hearing.
Well, I think, may I answer?
Yes.
Condition number 8, developer commits to grant sinkhole conservancy areas per chapter 829 should new sinkholes surface prior to lot development. A geotechnical engineer must be present on the site during initial mass grading of any phase, especially during the road and detention pond construction. If any issues arise, the petitioner's engineer will be required to notify staff and provide alternate plans.
So I see that as a fail-safe in the event that further sinkholes are discovered.
My idea with the geotech was as they're grading, have someone there that if they expose the karst situation, that it wouldn't just get buried over and move on. So that's a check during construction. I think there was also a question about as it develops and the change in the discharge patterns, that it might change the existing conditions in some way. And I think the best thing there is just to monitor it as the phases develop, and if something does pop up, then it goes back on the developer to eliminate that lot or make that area safe and remove it from the plat.
With my observation from looking at the LiDAR from 2012, from the geological kind of studies of the area, there are a lot of complex sinkholes, not only on this particular development, but in surrounding developments. So it's definitely a complex karst feature. And what it happens on this property stands the chance to impact the surrounding properties as well. What are we doing to calibrate for that?
I guess that's directed to me.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure that we can do anything other than put in conditions to remove that area of ground that exposes a sink, just remove it from potential development. There's always a risk anytime you do any grading that it might change something in the subsurface, and
Isn't that what
I don't know.
Sinkhole Conservancy area is for?
I'm sorry?
Isn't that what an SCA is for?
Yes, in my
Okay.
mind.
It is, but my concern is that many that close together tells me there's something else going on.
Yes,
And we don't know.
You're right, and from some exhibits that I've seen, the whole west half of the county is just riddled with it. So there is no good area.
And so Commissioner Thomas, in her question, asked, should there be inserted into the plan, the plan for development, a delay in phasing? And just so that we could calibrate what happens on, in the entire system of the Sinkhole Conservancy area, just to protect our community and to protect the builders and to protect the homeowners in the surrounding neighborhoods.
I think Kendall offered 4 or 5 years to build out. I don't know if you've got something more than that. That's a question for them.
Mr. Pittsford?
Before you go away, Terry.
Okay.
Number 10 requires draining calculations to be approved by you before issuance of any grading permits. How reliable, realistic are the modelings that you have through drainage calculations that you've done over time?
At the first hearing, he provided calculations for all of the detention to make sure that there was storage and the basins were sized adequately, and that he provided all the calculations for the detention. That's a major concept with the overall grading. What he had not submitted and asked if it would be all right if he held off after the first hearing was details like inlet spacing, calculations showing how much the water was encroaching out on the pavement, so we kept a clear lane to drive on.
Was this all so that they could make some final adjustments, fine tuning to the plat?
I guess the way I look at it is it's the details of the actual design. I don't see any of them as being a major issue. It's just calculations I make him go through.
Right. Okay, and then my next question would be, in your report for tonight, didn't you say that you've worked with them extensively through this process?
I've spent several hours on this, yes.
Okay, and then you felt like all your concerns had been addressed?
With this last list of these details, I sent them back to Kendall just recently. I can't remember if it was the first part of this week or end of last week, I believe. And he said he could accommodate them.
So with condition number 10, do you feel confident that all these concerns can be addressed?
I am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Quillman or for Kendall?
Not a question. You said condition 10, that was condition 9, just to clarify. And then at the...
No, 10 was calculations.
What was
9
the
and 10
calculation?
both address his opportunity to, 9 and 10 both address his opportunity to take care of final details, but I just referenced 10 in particular.
Okay, but I guess with, my question was to be consistent, on condition number 9, it says to be approved by, should we put the MS4 coordinator in there too?
I agree.
For which one?
Number nine.
Number 9. And I was kind of scanning through to see if it says to be approved by anyone at, just approved. And if so, I would recommend that we identify who we want that to be approved by through in all
Well,
those.
That certainly makes sense.
Right, and not to put too fine a point on it, but number 2 says approval by the MS4 operator. I realize it's same term or different term for the same person, but should we not be consistent?
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions for the petitioner, the petitioner's representative, Mr. Quillman, et cetera? Okay, then it's time to hear from the public. Is there anyone from the public here who would like to speak on behalf of this project, in favor of it? Seeing none, is there any member of the public who would like to speak in opposition to this project? Yes, sir. Please come and state your name.
I don't know if opposition is the right word.
Yes.
Just some questions. As I said last time. My name is Nathan May. I'm just a resident just south of this development. I guess a couple things, and you addressed, both Julie and Margaret, in a couple of your questions, you addressed a little bit. I am actually speaking on behalf of several people that listed some questions they wanted me just to make sure were brought up before this is finalized. The first question was just, are there any county plans to address the current flooding that already exists on South Rogers? Flooding that we've shut down that south section of South Rogers before it connects with Old State Road 37, kind of towards Mays Greenhouse. It was shut down just again this past weekend during that recent flooding because the water shooting up through the manhole in the middle of the road, and so it shuts down that section of the road. And I took a bunch of pictures. I didn't get to send them to Jackie, but I have just a ton of pictures from this past storm, and we're talking about a winter storm, not a spring multiple day storm, and just the flooding that exists already. Water to the bottom of the bridge, water on the south side of that road that is coming up almost to the rails to trails, the mulched area of the trail that cuts across. So before, I guess, and then I'm hearing kind of multiple part question. Is there anything being done to address that now? And if not, then the question was, before this all, we're approving this, which I'm still not clear how it isn't going to just further heighten the problem that exists now. We say that the property is relatively flat, but we ask for a waiver on 44 lots. Half of these lots to get a waiver against the grade so we don't do the grading. So if we're the water is not being slowed down, then now you're allowing that water to flow freely on the top of the ground until it hits these hopefully these retention areas that catch it. And the grading of the road is even considered a little bit too steep, in my opinion, when that water's flowing down that road. What's keeping it then from, I guess, multiple part questions. Then when these retention ponds fail, we're after the fact, development's gone, developers, petitioners are gone, and who's that left? Is that left on homeowners? Is that left on, we're talking about a 4-year phase, and I love that, but the beginning, these 44 lots, and this piece is a part of that earlier phase. So I think we will find out pretty early where this water is going and what's going to happen to it, but we already have an existing problem with flooding. And like I said, I have about 15 to 20 pictures that I walked through this area this last storm, and that was a one-day rain, and we're not even to spring flooding and spring rain and that now. So you did address my fear of these sinkholes washing out, and I appreciate that, and what happens then. This is left on the homeowners, because the only thing we have is that if anything shows up before the development starts, but here we're going to basically pass this on with this problem on to whoever is in these sinkhole areas, and who absorbs the cost of that sinkhole restoration when they do reveal themselves later. Because this was, you said 25 years ago, the last I'm not familiar with that term, but 1995 was the last thing we had about these sinkholes. Is that correct?
There's a more current map that was done with remote sensing. In 2012, there was a remote sensing of Indiana, but I don't think that the county referenced that when they came up with the plan.
Just reference the 95 one, is that right?
That's right.
I've heard the 95 one referenced.
So the 1995 date is significant because at that time it was under the planning and zoning jurisdiction of the city. And so at that point, there was a proposal, that's the last time this lot was in a proposal for development.
Okay.
So that's, yeah.
Sir, are you affiliated with May's Greenhouse?
I'm not.
No.
No,
Okay.
I'm not, but
Okay.
there's a bunch of May family in that area
Yes.
as well. But my family, where Finley grew up in the house across from the post office that we would love to eventually buy that property back, but it also is dealing with flooding through the entire backyard and stuff as well, so.
They experienced some loss this last year, some commercial loss. That's why I asked if you had information about that.
Yeah, I do not, but they did
Thank
major,
you.
major loss in that back
Yes.
from the flooding. So I guess that's my piece. We're gonna deal with the grade here, which is obviously going to affect what happens downhill of this. And I don't distrust the engineers and the plan and the water retention areas and those things, but my fear is they fail. And who's that going to be on? When homeowners are responsible for purchasing these properties, who is that? It's easy to develop this and walk away and go back to wherever that may be, California, wherever else, and we're left to deal with it. And now the county's left. We have a couple $100,000 a year in tax revenue from these homes, but we're left with millions of dollars worth of repairs on the bridges and roads in these areas. Whether that needs to be happening now or not, I don't know, but that was some of the questions from some people that asked me to bring up the questions regarding the flooding that already exists. And then the second question would be if FEMA denies the connection, because they're asking for a road through the floodway, and if FEMA denies that request to tie into the blind squirrel development, where are we at then? If that happens, if FEMA decides that that's not appropriate or that that's not a good idea. So those are a couple questions that I'd asked. The rest will be on a later development. So.
I would like to have Ms. Ridge and Mr. Schilling respond to the questions that Mr. Mays asked about, number one, the road flooding, and number two, the legal liability of potential damage from the flooding. So if you both could answer his questions, it would be very helpful. Thank you.
I can say yes, we are quite aware of the flooding all around Monroe County. I think with this petition, I can't speak before me and before Terry came on board, but a lot of these requirements and recommendations that they're asking for in this are a lot of new requirements to start moving forward to addressing a lot of these. We do have a stormwater long-range plan that has over 50 projects in it. I know there's some areas in Roger Street that is in that long-range plan. To go out and tackle all of those at once, we don't have the funding to do that. But we are aware, I think Terry and an engineering group was just down there in the Fairway Lane area to look at a project. So we are quite aware. We were out with the flooding that weekend also. But yeah, it's we can't fix all the problems in the county, but seeing what is recommended and seeing the inspections and everything that they are requiring with the MS4 coordinator, that's the step that we've been wanting to take for quite some time to try and alleviate some of those potential increases to the flooding.
Sure. I think the fear that I was hearing is with this new common enemy law that basically says if I end up having flooding on my property, what happened when the highway came through, several homes had filed lawsuits against water that became a problem, and it was ruled, oh, it's just a common enemy. Well, it wasn't a common enemy until a development came through like a highway or like a neighborhood development came in. So yes, there's flooding now, but it's easy to call it a common enemy. But you created.
I'm not aware of that.
I'm not speaking. I'm sorry.
Term,
I'm just saying.
so.
I wasn't speaking directly to you. Just in general, like it's easy to call water a common enemy, but if we're dealing with it in small amounts now, but this development causes whatever later, now we're just stuck. Okay, build a berm around your property or whatever your hope is to keep the water away from you. So I think that's the major fear right now on several of the homes around in that clear off of Roger Street, but also on the South College Drive side of this. Near the school, because we see the water that runs off of it every time it storms, and trying to keep that water away from your homes is a big deal, and it can be really costly as well. So I guess that's if there's any, speak into that. But.
Yeah, I guess we have our stormwater ordinance that requires the pre-development and post-development runoff to be about the same. And so we have standards, and Terry looks at them and makes a call on that. And you know, if it meets it, it meets it. And under our subdivision control ordinance, we have standards, and if developers meet those standards, they're entitled to subdivision approval. So in this case, as Lisa pointed out, the staff has gone above and beyond that to obtain some conditions and agreements with the developer to deal with some of that.
Yep.
As far as the common enemy, that's been around forever, and as long as you don't funnel or channel water, it's just something that everybody has to deal with.
Sure, and and you spoke exactly to. I love the 9 and 10. I think a lot of that will, in the phase piece of it, hopefully will address where the water's going. But if we know we're funneling it to certain areas, you know, and my hope is that in funneling it, all this water without grading, like we've asked for waivers on half of the property. So my hope is then that with all the other now, the roads and every bit of other possibility for water absorption being taken away, we are funneling it. We're just saying we'll address that in our storm sewer and our retention ponds or in our other areas. So my thought is we're funneling it to a couple areas that we're hoping at this point, but I love the clauses that were put in to think 9 and 10 to say, hey, if this is already happening, or if it's causing these sinkholes to wash out, or if it's because a lot of those are in those common areas now as well. You know, if it causes those to run out, we still will have some sort of possibility of saying, hold up, this isn't working. Is that correct?
There is, I mean, I was out of the room for a second, but there is a phasing issue. The preliminary plan is viable for 2 years unless it's extended by the Plan Commission. And so after that 2 years, if they don't have the development completely done, then you could be in a position to reconsider some of the drainage issues.
I just want to clarify something. You had mentioned, sir, that you're concerned about FEMA access to build a roadway, but my understanding is the FEMA floodplain area is only in a common area, meaning an undeveloped area, not a roadway. Is that correct?
It is in the way of that road connection, so he's
Okay.
correct. So if they did not get the permits through FEMA
Right.
to do the construction through the floodway, we wouldn't let them final plat that first phase of the development, which means that they would have to come back and ask from permission from the Plan Commission to redo the whole subdivision phasing.
Right, but there's no FEMA issue with a developed lot, right? There's no FEMA issue with any lots that are planned for development. But there is with that road.
Yes.
that road.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
And I'm sorry, and then just to follow on to that, if FEMA were to deny the permit, then basically nothing can happen, and they'd have to come back to us, they'd have to kind of start from square one.
That's the first permit that they would need to get approval for, and then we wouldn't even issue any grading permits. Nothing would happen until that permit.
So does that answer that
It
question?
did. Yeah, it did, for sure. I think
It's a good question.
I think that addresses the questions I had. The only other question was someone had asked the last meeting, so this is the final one, so we just wanted to clarify. At the last one, they had mentioned, and I think you had even spoke to the idea of crossing those socioeconomic lines and liking the idea of a trail connecting through the north end into the Southern Meadows development. And it was told, it was approved, and now that is not going to happen, correct?
Right, the sidewalk will only go up to the boundary line. They didn't have consent from the mobile home park owner to come onto the property to connect the trail.
Isn't the mobile home owner here and a part of this process?
No. Previous owner.
Okay. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to have, yes, sir. Please come in and state your name and sign in, please.
My name is Jack Skiles. I'm at 4902 South Rogers. Two issues.
Yes.
First has to do with our current flooding. I know you've heard it, but you may as well hear a little bit again. At 4902, I'm right next to the antique store. The way the water currently happens where we all live is it comes down the hill of the proposed development, hits the railroad bed, follows a drainage tile that comes under the road, and goes through my property. It goes under the road, and in theory, it's supposed to follow a ditch out to Clear Creek. It's highly inadequate as it currently is. Right now, what happens, like it happened the other day, is once the other side of the road fills up, it comes up over Rogers Street, comes in and floods my basement. In the back, because of the way the ditch was done, it tries to go into Clear Creek and cannot go into Clear Creek because Clear Creek came up at least 6 feet during the last rain that we had. What happens is all of our backyards, 35% of my property fills up with water. And so I simply concur that we're very, very concerned how water drainage is already impacting us, as well as what might happen as a result. And we don't know because we don't have the drainage report yet in terms of what will be required. I have a hard time speaking on behalf of the project until I hear the drainage report. And I would ask that we consider not giving final approval at all until we get a drainage report, because we have a very fragile ecosystem there already, and it's being detrimentally hampered by the amount of water we already have. I have a hard time thinking it's going to get any better. Secondly, the kids across IU's campus, God bless them, they're 19 and plus years old. They can stay out of traffic. Kids going to the elementary school may not have the sense to do that. I think it would make a lot more sense to develop the south side of that property first, so that the development, as it moves west, kids already have a way to get to the elementary school. We have no sidewalks existing in that area at all. And if the trail doesn't go through, which I think would be a great idea, but I know it's going to cut through several people's properties, not to put in sidewalks, I think is a grand mistake. I'm an elderly guy and I walk every day, and it's dangerous on Rogers Street. The speed limit is 30. I would guess that we probably average 45. And I think that sidewalks are an absolute necessity if we're going to continue the project. That's it.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on this issue? Then we're back to the commission and further discussion by the members of the commission. And to my left, are there any additional points or questions? Oh, yes, sir. Yes. Could you please come up to the microphone and state your name and sign in, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I missed you.
Robert Logsdon. I live at 4910 South Rogers Street, and I'd like to say I appreciate what you all are doing, trying to control everything, keep it under control, and I think the development would be nice. I'm a lifelong resident of Clear Creek. The water issue is a severe issue. I don't think, unless you've lived there, I don't think you understand really what we're dealing with. Clear Creek is overtaxed. It has Jackson Creek running into it just south of Clear Creek. It has a west fork of Clear Creek running into it. All the drainage from the south side comes into Jackson Creek, from the center of Bloomington comes into Clear Creek. And it's constantly flooding down there. It flooded when I was a child, but not like it does now. I saw literally a railroad cross tie float across the front of Mr. Sykes, or Mr. Jack's property there. He knew in the neighborhood, I'm not really up with his name, but a cross tie floated across there. And Rogers Street is flooded on a regular basis. So I just don't know what the answer is, but Clear Creek is overtaxed with that. I'm concerned too about the safety of pedestrians. The post office is a very, very busy place, and there's accidents up there on a regular basis. All of this is going to add a load to a number of individuals that are up and down the street. So the safety issues, I think, need to be very carefully considered as far as children getting to the school, pedestrians walking to the post office, the water, a very serious issue. My house is the last house on Rogers Street on the west side before you get to the Iron Pit Gym. And as Jack was pointing out a minute ago, the railroad built on both sides of Rogers Street. the railroads were built up on the west side of Clear Creek. They built Illinois Central. Well, that prevented Clear Creek from flooding to the west, so it floods toward Clear Creek. On the east side, they built the railroad on the east side of Rogers Street, and then the water is funneled right down into Clear Creek with no place to flood out, no floodplain to travel out. So I just don't know what to say, except I'm very concerned about what this is going to do to the area as far as future flooding is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ogden. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak before I turn it over to the members of the commission again? Okay, to the commission, members of the commission to my left, is there anything that you'd like to add or ask?
I've got a question. The way I understood Terry's comments with the drainage process, when the petitioner came in and the engineer came in and started developing the layout, was the first thing that you reviewed, Terry, was that, and you don't need to get up, but was it the detention location and the calculations associated with the detention?
Yes, and I have a final report on that.
Okay.
And then he came forward with our ordinance.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question. Are they meeting the ordinance as Dave says, or are they exceeding the ordinance?
They're exceeding.
Okay. And then this is I mean, if you look at the way those neighborhoods have formed over the years, this is basically at the tail end of that drainage. So sometimes as the drainage comes through, as the water develops at the low end, it passes through sometimes much before the water upstream can come through. And you know, I'm not going to get in the weeds here because I didn't do anything with this, but you come into a beat the peak scenario where sometimes this water's passed before the water upstream actually hits the area, and you know, the water comes down in like this instead of like that all at once. So I didn't know if the petitioner wanted to speak to the drainage concepts and maybe point out where your detention ponds are again for the public and kind of explain that.
Sure, I can do that. Do you have a grading plan, maybe?
A grading plan?
Yeah. I don't know if you do or not. Oh, yes, this will work. Right up there, right here, and right there. Those are the 3 detention areas, and so all of the new impervious surfaces are directed to those detention areas, and they basically fill up like a bathtub with water and slowly release it. Now, the north 2 basins release directly into the floodway, and there's no homes or anything, so it gets to the creek without having to pass through anyone's property. Now, the south one is released into that stream you see on the south side. And I think that is the stream that one of the neighbors was talking about that crosses under the road and then goes into the Clear Creek. So I will say that that basin will be holding back all of our stormwater and slowly releasing it into that stream. Does that answer the question?
And I think that's one of the things I picked up when Mr. Quillman was up there, is that the first step that he required was to start looking at how the detention and how the overall water was going to be handled on the site based on how the ordinance said it needed to be, and apparently they've exceeded it at least to some degree. And that's the thing I wanted to be clear on. And then none of these sites are on septic, correct? They're all on sewer, okay.
Okay. Do any members of the commission to my right have any comments or concerns or questions? Yes, Mr. McKim?
I'm sorry, one of the members of the public referred to a drainage report that wasn't available. Is that just those final calculations that's being referred to, or is there some other report that should be here that isn't available? Because my impression was that Mr. Quillman had given us the drainage report on the development.
Kendall has submitted the drainage report for all of the detention basin and that portion of the stormwater design. He has not submitted supporting design calculations for gutter encroachment, inlet capacities. I asked for emergency overflow weirs for the detention basins. He has to size the velocity of those weirs. It's just, I don't want to play this down, but it's minutia. And he'll be submitting that, and it'll be added to the overall report. He has submitted a formal finished report for all the detention, and I've reviewed it and signed off on it before the first hearing, I believe.
Okay, and those final calculations are handled by a condition 10 if that becomes
Yes.
part of the,
Yes.
the conditions. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Then I'll entertain a motion.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
In the matter of case number 1906-SPP-01, Southern Meadows Major Preliminary Plat and Plat Vacation at 4600 block of South College Drive, request being a major subdivision preliminary plat to subdivide one parcel into 98 parcels and plat the vacation of Tract 2 of the South Crest Mobile Home Park, Type A, administrative subdivision and buildable area for waiver for lots 16 through 23, 35 through 45, 47 through 52, 61 through 63, 68 through 72, 76 through 78, 85 through 86, and 91 through 94. I move that we approve the subdivision based on findings of facts listed in the staff report, based on the recommended conditions provided by the Highway Department, and based on the recommendations 1 through 10 that staff has provided in the report, with one minor modification I'd like to do in number 9 and number 10. I would like to combine to say drainage details of floodway crossing at west entrance and remaining drainage calculations are to be approved by MS4 coordinator prior to issuance of any grading permits. And the reason why I did that is because it had the same language that I'd asked regarding number 10, so I don't know that that was exactly clear the way we had it originally, and that's the only reason why we made that change. So 1 through 8 being the same, 9 and 10 being combined into 9.
Second.
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment, and that's just with condition number 2, change it from MS4 operator to MS4 coordinator as well.
Mr. McKim?
So accepted. Oh,
Okay.
excuse me.
Sorry, Mr. Hicks. Okay.
That's condition 2. MS4 coordinator as an operator.
Okay, Mr. Wilson? Yes, Mr. McKim seconded.
The motion is on petition 1906-SPP-01, Southern Meadows preliminary plat. A vote is to approve the preliminary subdivision plat, the plat vacation, the buildable area waiver request, and this is a final hearing, so it would be to approve everything finally. The motion for approval was based on findings of the conditions in the staff report, including the county highways engineer report, including the county highways drainage report, and recommendations 1 through 10 with condition 2, 9, and 10 as amended during the motion. Got that? Okay. A vote in favor is a vote to approve the preliminary plat as set forth in the motion. Margaret Clemens?
No.
Trina Randolph?
Yes.
Bernie Garitas?
Yes.
Jeff McKim?
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford?
Yes.
Julie Thomas?
No.
Amy Thompson is absent. David Warren?
Yes.
Okay. The petition to approve the preliminary plat is approved by a 5-2 vote.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone. This has been a very difficult case, but the effort that you put into the planning was really impressive. And although I did not vote in favor of it, I really thought that due diligence was achieved, and I appreciate all of the hard work everyone put into it. Thank you. Okay, so we are moving on to new business, and the next case is 1910-REZ-10 Rupert rezone from single dwelling residential 3.5 to low density residential. And this is a primary hearing with the request to waive the final hearing. Thank you, Mr. Myers.
This is case number 1910-REZ-10, the Philip Rupert rezone from single dwelling residential 3.5 to low density residential LR. So just to give you some summary and a timeline here, the petitioner requests to rezone approximately 0.92 acres from single dwelling residential 3.5 to low density residential. Should the rezone be approved, the land use of a guest house will be permitted on the property by right. Originally, the petitioner applied for a building permit in order to construct a 16 by 24 addition to the existing single-family residence. During that application review process, planning staff became aware of an addition to the existing detached garage that occurred at some point between 2005 and 2010. The addition added approximately 528 square feet to the existing 720 square foot detached garage. The detached garage was issued an improvement location permit for the 720 square feet back in 1999. There are no permits on record for the 528 square foot addition. Upon review of the site, planning staff initially believed the petitioner was operating a carpet cleaning business, a home-based business, out of the detached garage in addition. The petitioner acknowledged that work vehicles are parked on site, but no other business activities occur on the property. Additionally, the petitioner informed planning staff that the addition to the detached garage serves as a spare living space for when the petitioner hosts a traveling missionary for a few months out of the year. Now, this type of use would be classified as a guest house, and Chapter 2 defines this use as, quote, an accessory building containing a lodging unit with or without kitchen facilities used to house occasional visitors or non-paying guests of the occupants of a dwelling unit on the same site, unquote. Now, in order to permit this land use of guest house on the property, the petitioner was presented with two options by planning staff. The first option was to file for a rezone petition to the low-density residential, which has very similar design standards to the RS 3.5, but it permits the use of a guest house. Or alternatively, the other option was to file for a use variance petition to Chapter 833 to request the use of a guest house on the property in the RS 3.5 zone. The RS 3.5 zone is part of the zoning designations outlined in Chapter 833, or the former fringe zones of the City of Bloomington's jurisdiction. Both the RS 3.5 and the LR zoning districts share similar design standards, and I will show you some of those similarities in a little while. Up on the screen, you can see the differences in permitted uses for each zone. The one on the left is the uses that are available in Chapter 802, which would be the LR zone. And then the one on the right is the Chapter 833 permitted uses that are available in the current RS 3.5 zone. And again, the primary reason for this rezone would be to permit the use of guest house, which is available in the LR zoning district. So the property is located at 3937 West Walnut Leaf Drive, pardon me. It is in Van Buren Township, Section 12. Its current zoning is RS 3.5, and you can see some of the surrounding zonings here. The general business in red to the north is primarily Walmart, along with other commercial sites. And there's also other residential zones in the nearby area, RE 2.5 to the west, and then RM 7 to the east. And then RE 1 to the southwest, and then continuing on with RS 3.5 to the south east. The comprehensive plan currently designates this property as McCua mixed use. And the McCua Phase 2 proposed zoning map has this area designated as N1 Urban Infill Neighborhood. Some site conditions on the property. It is fairly flat. There are hardly any steep slopes on the property, and there are no known karst features on the property, no FEMA floodplain, etc. Here's the slope map of the property where you can see a tiny bit of greater than 15% slope on the property that would be in the northeast corner. Now we have some site photos. This photograph to the upper left is from the easement on West Walnut Leaf Drive. You can see the bottom right corner photograph continues on this easement that comes off of West Walnut Leaf Drive back to Mr. Rupert's property. And then top left is continuing on the easement that rounds into his home. You can see it in the background. And then in the bottom right photograph, you can see the current single-family residence on the site. The upper left photograph shows the detached garage and additional living space that was attached without a permit in the background. And same with the bottom right photograph. This is another angle at that structure. Here we have a couple more photographs of the detached garage with the addition. That's the top left photograph, and then the bottom right photograph is of the carport and utility shed that are also on the property. Turning around now, you can see, this is from the detached garage, you can see the single-family residence on the site, and another angle of that with the drive in the bottom right photograph. We have some aerial photographs. The light blue box is where the structure is that we're talking about. And then please note that the property to the north as well is owned by Mr. Rupert.
I'm sorry?
The property to the north, immediately adjacent, is also owned by the same property owner. Here's another angle of aerial photography of the detached garage and additional living space. This is the petitioner's letter. Representative Eric Deckard, who did the survey work for him. We have that survey here. These documents are in your packet for your review. And now here we have the design standards difference between the RS 3.5 zoning district and the LR zoning district. As you can see, a lot of these categories are very similar, if not exactly the same. The minimum lot size for the RS 3.5 zone is 0.22 acres, and the minimum lot size for the LR zone is 0.34 acres, so it's going up. Same with the minimum lot width, it's going up. Max height is going down from 40 feet to 35 feet, and then building coverage going up from 35% to 40, and so forth, as you can see on the screen here. So very similar design standards, almost identical zones between the original Bloomington fringe zones and the current county zones. Here are those design standards tables where I pulled that information from. Those are also in your packet as well. Tonight, if the rezone is denied, the unpermitted living space addition will remain non-conforming to the RS 3.5 zone. The petitioner would be required to decommission the unpermitted living space addition via the removal of the bathroom, bedroom, or kitchen, whatever would be applicable. And additionally, the petitioner could pursue the use variance process. I'll wait for the bells. petitioner could pursue the use variance process in an attempt to gain permission of the guest house use in the RS 3.5 zone if this rezone is denied. If the rezone is approved tonight, the use of guest house would be permitted on this property by right. All uses of the LR zone would now be available on the property unless otherwise specified by this plan commission. The petitioner would be required to apply for a permit to convert the use of the residential accessory structure to that of a guest house and also submit an affidavit that would confirm the structure meets the definition as identified in Chapter 802. And then finally, the petitioner would need to apply for all necessary after-the-fact permits on the property to bring everything up to code and conformity. So overall, staff recommends approval based on the findings of fact, subject to the county highway and drainage engineer reports, and subject to the following conditions. Number one, the petitioner apply for a permit to convert the use of the residential accessory structure to that of a guest house. With the application, the petitioner is required to submit an affidavit confirming the accessory structure will meet the definition of a guest house as defined in Chapter 802 of the Monroe County zoning ordinance. And then number two, the petitioner apply for all the necessary after-the-fact building permits for all unpermitted structures on the property. I will now take any questions you have.
Do any members of the commission? Yes, Commissioner Thomas.
So I have a couple questions. I had these for the PRC. I was going to email them in, and then the meeting was canceled anyway, so it all worked out. So here we are. Could you, for the public's edification, I think I have a question about a detail here once you do this. What is the difference between a guest house and a tourist home?
A guest house is an accessory use to a residential structure where there's no payment.
There's no what?
No payment, no compensation
I see.
for the use, and it is to be used intermittently. It does not change the essential character of the residence as a single-family dwelling. A tourist home, on the other hand, is an independent land use where somebody takes the residential structure and rents it for short-term stays as opposed to long-term rental of 30 days or more. Mm-hmm. In other words, you could have a house and rent it for long-term, okay? And that's a residential use in all of our residential districts. It doesn't change just because you don't live in it, as long as it's being used for residential use that extends over a 30-day period. However, if you rent it for less than 30 days, that becomes a tourist home under our ordinance.
And that's exactly the crux of my question. So where does a guest house fit in? Does it mean that it cannot be more than 30 days without payment, or it doesn't matter? It just says intermittent, and that
Well,
could, I'm
the
just
idea
curious.
is not to, basically it's for guests to arrive and stay for a very short period of time.
Right. We have not defined that.
Huh?
We have not defined what that short period of time is. Correct?
It's not for a guest home.
Right.
It just-
Okay. I'm just curious. Just one of those things I'm writing down for, we got to talk about this when we talk about ordinances. Because it seems kind of, yeah. So,
Well, I'll read the definition so we're just all on the same page here. A guest house, an accessory building containing a lodging unit with or without kitchen facilities used to house occasional visitors or non-paying guests of the occupants of a dwelling unit on the same site. So the occasional would indicate that it's not
which we should
a long-term.
It
could be
so this brings
more
me to my
defined.
next question, which is septic is fine for a guest house?
This site's on sewer.
This is on sewer, right? But the septic is fine for a guest house, so that doesn't matter anyway, right?
Yeah, again, you would have to have a
Okay.
you'd have to have a sewage
Right.
disposal system of some kind.
Okay.
Either a municipal sewer or a approved
Okay.
septic tank.
All right, so onto this specific property, is there any concern remaining regarding the business use on this property? As that was mentioned?
Per conversations with the representative or the petitioner, he said that they do park vehicles at the site. He is amenable to stopping that parking and moving them elsewhere, but he has attested that no other business activities go on site other than the parking of some vehicles.
All right. Quick question, just to clarify, the guest house would have to have a certificate of occupancy, just like any other dwelling unit, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And Mr. Warren, did you have a question?
Yeah, excuse me, I have a couple questions. Some other buildings are on the, excuse me, are on the property that are not permitted. Whether or not the rezone happens, would all those buildings be allowed with the permits, or would he have to get rid of one?
That's a good question. So the other structures on the property that I believe were unpermitted were the carport and the utility shed. Improvement or after the fact improvement location permits would be attainable to bring those into compliance. There would be no issue with maximum building coverage or setbacks or anything like that that I'm aware of. Certainly when we received those after the fact permit applications, we would have another review round just in case anything that would need to be addressed at that time.
Okay. On decommissioning, if the rezone doesn't go through, I think you mentioned something about how a bathroom would have to be removed or a kitchen would have to be removed. It would still, you wouldn't be demolishing this building, right? You'd be taking out one part of it.
So we would not be demolishing. So in order to decommission a living space is defined as having all three of those characteristics. And I know in the guest house definition it says with or without a kitchen facility. So if there is not a kitchen facility in the structure, then in order to bring it out of the classification of a living space, the bedroom or the bathroom would have to be decommissioned.
Okay. Okay. One more question. So, in your opinion, as planners who do this every day of your lives, let's say a rezone does happen. Do you believe, in your opinion, would that sort of incentivize other people to ask for forgiveness rather than permission? I'm just trying to get a sense. I'm not saying I'm leaning one way or another. I'm trying to get your
I don't know the exact
your evidence,
but probably 20% of all our applications are individuals asking for forgiveness, which we readily give. See people come in and comply with the ordinance, and get the necessary permits.
In this, I guess I'm asking about this case in particular, where it's a 500 square foot, essentially an accessory dwelling unit. In your opinion, would this lead to a bunch of other people doing this throughout the county in the same zone?
The biggest problem we have are small buildings because there's confusion. There is an exemption under the ordinance for 120 square feet or less, both from the building code and from the zoning ordinance. And in the all types of dimensions are out there that people think are permitted without a permit, because it's confusing. They have different jurisdictions, have different rules and so on. There's confusion over whether or not, if it's on a foundation or not, whether you need to get a permit. There's no really good way to address it just other than through public education and making it easy to comply with the ordinance through a simplified process. But we have legitimate concerns with these small buildings because they can be over a septic tank system. They do have to comply with setback requirements. So those are things that we have concerns about. So it's not a case where we just exempt them under the ordinance.
Mr. McKim?
Yeah, so two things. So first of all, to go back to the definition of guest house. So the use as a guest house specifically precludes compensation, right? So this does not allow the property or something like it to be used as an Airbnb, for example.
No, guest house is without compensation.
Okay, right. So that's why I'm just making sure that we're not opening the door, let's say everybody in the neighborhood decided to do that, would we be creating a whole bunch of Airbnbs? And the answer to that, I'm
Well,
saying,
and the other thing about it is too, we have a tourist home provision. There is state legislation that basically allows somebody to rent their home as an Airbnb. Their home, but they have to live in it. They can't use an accessory structure or a site, another house, and turn it into an Airbnb. We still are allowed under state statute to regulate those as tourist homes.
thank you. And then the other thing is, and this comes back to a comment that I think I made at the admin meeting, and it comes as sort of an apology to staff. I used the term spot zoning, and I've then since done some research into the history of spot zoning and read more carefully the McCoua Phase 2 plan and everything. And although this is obviously this would be one little parcel surrounded by parcels of a different classification, it clearly is in keeping with the comprehensive plan and with the McCoua Phase 2 and 1 designation. So I apologize for using that term, and I would not consider this to be an instance of spot zoning.
And the other factor is spot zoning is, does it look like a spot, too? So it's kind of a double factor.
Right, and that's why, that's what I latched onto last time.
Yeah, and in your defense, if it looks like a spot and it doesn't relate to the zoning, the comprehensive plan, then it's clearly spot zoning.
Right, and I latched onto the first prong of that definition and not the second.
It'll look like a spot on the map, but, but it is so similar. Those two zones are so similar, and this whole thing's gonna get rezoned anyway, so I don't even know why we.
Yeah, are there any other questions from the commission for the staff before we hear from the petitioner? Okay, would the petitioner like to speak? Yes, and please state your name and sign in, please.
My name is Philip Rupert, and I've lived there for about 20 years, 22 years. And about five years ago, I hired a contractor from French Lick, and I thought he got a permit. I didn't find out until I just applied for the addition for my house that it didn't have a permit. And they said, wait a minute, this, and maybe he thought I got the permit, but I've never got a permit before. And so when we did this, and then I found out there was no permit on that. And then they said that the carport, I didn't get a permit for the carport because I thought it had to be put in concrete and it's just staked to the ground. And they said, no, if it's so many square feet, you got to get a permit. So I didn't know about that, and I didn't know that it wasn't permitted when it was built until we added that the house. And then they approved the house permit as long as I applied for the zoning. And then, so we got that done. We got the house part added onto it and got it done. But that's the reason that it didn't have a permit. It was not intentional.
Thank you, Mr. Rupert. Are there any members of the public here who would like to speak either for or against this petition? Yes, Mr. Schilling?
I just want to say something about spot zoning.
Yes.
Before you.
Yes.
And spot zoning is a type of zoning that exists when you don't give consideration to the statutory criteria. So you can have a massive residential area and decide to zone a small spot in there commercial. As long as it's serving the residential areas, it may make sense to have a commercial node. So it would look like a spot on the map, but if you look at your comprehensive plan, if you've given consideration to planning principles and so forth, then it's not going to be a spot zone. So a spot zone is simply something that doesn't appear to be justified by any facts.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schilling. Now, I'm going to repeat the question. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak on this case or ask questions on this case? Seeing none, is there any discussion among the members of the commission who would like to express concerns or support or opposition to this? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll make the motion in case 1910-REZ-10, rezone from single dwelling residential 3.5, RS 3.5, to low density residential, LR. I recommend approval, or I move we recommend approval based on the findings of fact, subject to the county highway and drainage engineer reports, and subject to the following conditions. 1, the petitioner apply for a permit to convert the use of the residential accessory structure to that of a guest house. With the application, the petitioner is required to submit an affidavit confirming the accessory structure will meet the definition of a guest house as defined in Chapter 802 of the Monroe County Zoning Ordinance. And 2, the petitioner apply for all necessary after-the-fact building permits for all unpermitted structures on the property.
May I ask a question, waiver of second hearing?
Oh, that's.
I was
Or
not
waiver
making
of
that
filing
motion,
hearing.
but if
Okay.
other people would prefer to, I mean, I'm open for it.
I would offer a friendly amendment that we add to Mr. McKim's motion waiver of final hearing.
All right, I'll make that motion.
I second the motion. Or can I? Okay. Okay, Mr. Wilson?
To move the second to approve petition number 1910-REZ-10, the Rupert zoning map amendment or rezone. And that is to rezone the property located at 3937 West Walnut Leaf Drive from RE 3.5 to low-density residential LR. Vote in the favor is a vote to approve the recommendation to the Plan Commission of a favorable, or to the commissioners with a favorable recommendation based upon the findings, conditions in the staff report, and including the county highway engineers and the county drainage engineer report, subject to the conditions set forth by staff at tonight's meeting, both 1 and 2. Trina Ray Randolph.
Yes.
Bertie Garitas.
Yes.
Jeff McKim.
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford.
I would say wrong venue, wrong process, no.
Okay. Julie Thomas.
Say yes.
Said a yes?
Yes.
Okay. David Warren.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
Motion carries 6 to 1.
Thank you, Mr. Rupert. You don't have another hearings. Good luck. Yeah. Okay. We move on to reports from staff.
Yeah, Jackie and I have been spending a good deal of time kind of going through and organizing material in regard to the zoning ordinance update. We've been going through all the definitions that have been developed in the past year. We are looking at the zoning maps, and I hope that by the administrative meeting, have a short presentation on some things we want you to consider before we make a recommendation to the new consultant as to the outline of the ordinance. There are a couple of things. One, we're a little concerned there may not be enough districts. We have too many now, but there needs to be enough districts so you don't have a whole lot of different uses and parcel sizes in the same district. The other factor is to make sure that we have clear definitions for all uses that are out there, and that individuals don't have to get an interpretation every time they come in to do something. So it's kind of balancing, the number of uses with the clarity and predictability of a definition as to what that use is. But we'll have more information on that at the February meeting. Dave?
Mr. Schilling? Okay. Okay.
We're not sad.
We're not saying.
I just wanted to make sure that we clarified that this has left the Plan Commission, but the process does continue and it moves to the county commissioner, so you will have another meeting, just making sure that you are aware of that. You mentioned that there's no more meetings, not on the Plan Commission.
Just a hearing here, but okay, I stand corrected. Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure that you didn't just
Thank you.
forget about it, but you'll have one more discussion with the
We don't-
rezone.
We don't typically hear use variances.
It's a rezone.
It is a rezone.
Yeah.
But we typically don't hear use variances. Like, so typically those go to BZA, right? So why did this process turn out to be different? Because of the rezone?
Zoning map
Uh-huh.
requires an amendment.
Just curious.
If it was a use variance, it would go to the BZA.
Right, right. But there's, yeah, I get it, yeah.
Okay. Okay, well then, is there a move to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.